Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy. Do you want to get more performance out of your BMW M2, M3, or M4? I'll show you how. All right, guys, so let's talk about this project a little bit before we do it and the reasons why you're going to want to do this as well and some of the big advantages. Now, I am really excited to be partnering with Dinan on this, and that is that great powerhouse of performance for BMWs for so long. They have a new jump box for the S58 motor. So that's the M2, M3, M4, probably the X3M as well. But this is going to be a really simple way to get more performance out of your car and in an easier fashion. Now, BMW leaves a lot of headroom for performance in our cars. They just do. That just makes sense. And from a manufacturing place, I would do the exact same thing. But our motors and our cars are capable of a lot more than what they are stock. Now, there's the complication of unlocking your DME, which is the brain inside your computer. There's a big box on the inside that controls your computer. And if you want to tune your G80s, it is a long and expensive process. You have to take your DME out, you have to ship it to Europe, and then ship it back. It's a big hassle. Now, one thing you can do is install essentially what is a jump box. This sits between your motor and your DME. It takes the signals coming out of the DME, reinterprets them a little bit, sends them out to the sensors, and gets more performance out of your car. This is a plug-and-play solution. You don't have to take out your DME. It doesn't have to be unlocked. You can plug this in directly. So I'm going to walk you through this whole process. This is a really cool thing to do if you want to get a little bit more, but you don't want to go through the time and expense of having to unlock your DME. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so there's a couple of things we're going to have to do first before we install this, because we need to get to a number of the sensors around the motor. So we're going to have to pull some plastics off, but most importantly, when you pop your hood, walk your key away from the car. It has to be away from the car for at least 5 minutes. Now, as we go and remove these braces, you've got that amount of time basically baked into the process, but you do want to be very careful with that. So my key fob has been away for longer than that now. Now, I've got an aftermarket brace on. If you have the OEM brace, it's going to be a little bit different. I'll speak to that. Your OEM brace, you have a 13mm bolt here in the center, and you've got 8 15mm nuts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 around the outside. The slight difference between the M3s and M4s and the M2s, the M2s have this plastic that overhang the bolts a little bit. The M3s and M4s do not, so you don't have to worry about that as much. But we're going to be taking those plastics off anyway. So I'd go ahead and start there. You've got your little twist locks. Go ahead and look for your hose line right here that goes across the top, so you can go ahead and take this out. You're going to do the same to that side to uncover those bolts, and then go ahead and take this off. With my aftermarket, I've got a little bit of mix of different bolts on, but if you're OEM, it's going to be 15s at this end and a 13 here in the center. So go ahead and pull your engine brace off, and then go ahead and lift your cover off as well, and then we'll catch up from there. All right, y'all, so again, we're gonna have to walk through a little bit of differences between my car and a stock car, but it all makes sense. So the brace is off, the cover's off, as you can see, and then you're gonna wanna take your intakes out. Now, if you have the default intake boxes, they go in here on both sides. They're big plastic boxes that go in with the tubes that come over, and you've got clips here at either end, on this pipe on this end, and this pipe on this end. You wanna pull those clips, and then in the stock scenario, the whole box will come out. They're sitting on grommets and feet. You just pull up on it and the entire box will come out, because you want this intake out and this intake out to give us room to maneuver around on the motor itself and get to the sensors we need to get to. In my case, obviously, I've got aftermarket. I'm not going to walk through that just because it's different, and I want to make sure to address the stock scenario rather than aftermarket. If you do have aftermarket, just check on what their instructions are to get your intakes in and out. If it's MST, I've got those. I've got a video up for that. Okay, so go ahead and take your intakes out, and then we're going to start to look on laying out the wiring harness. We're here on the driver's side of the car. So go ahead and lift up this plastic piece to get underneath it in the gap here in the weather stripping, and you'll tuck it back down when it's done. But go ahead and run the main cable of your wiring harness through that gap. Now, like I said, with the M2, we have a little bit of additional plastics here, so route it down underneath that. And we'll settle this back down here in a second. Go ahead and plug in the PCU unit. It clicks in solidly. It's going to be down back here in this well when we're done. Go ahead and lay out the rest of your harnesses, and I'm going to walk you through routing the rest of the harnesses down to the sensors. But this is one of the reasons why we had to have your intake out, because we're going to get down to the sensor down here. I've removed the cover from the DME, which is right here. You can slide it out from underneath that hose right there, and it just comes out. There's just little pressure grommets and feet on it. It's going to help us to run a cable down a little bit more easily, get the wire down. But the other thing that I've done is I've also laid all of our connectors out so you can see them much more clearly, and we can work through them a series at a time. Okay, so you've got your boost pressure sensor here. That's the first one we're going to work with right here. Then we're looking at the manifold absolute pressure sensor, which is right here. This is going to be power when we get to it. And then here we have the exhaust cam and fuel rail sensors as well. So we're just going to work our way through this series. Now we're going to be removing a 10mm nut down there so we can get to that initial sensor a little bit more easily. So let me rearrange and get down close there for you. So you've got this auxiliary water pump right here. There's a 10mm nut that you're going to want to back off, and then this pump will give you some play in it that you can lift it up a little bit to get it up and out of the way. Now looking down in here, and it may be a little bit hard to see because I've got my light on it, but let me point right there. You can see lit up by my light. That's the sensor you're trying to get to right there. And there's really no way to get your hand down in there without moving the pump. Okay, so go ahead and back that nut off, lift the pump out of the way. There's a tab on that sensor. You press the tab and pull it back and it'll come off. And then we will plug it in here and plug the new connector in. Does that make sense? The existing plug goes in here. The new connector goes back into place, and then we'll put the pump back on. But I want to move my pump and show you what that looks like. All right, so you can see that sensor's now unplugged. I've got the end of the plug just sitting there. You're going to want to take the new harness, plug the existing plug in here, make sure it locks down properly, take this and lock it into place. Now, when you route this down, you're going to want to route it down in a safe place where it can get down to that sensor without being pinched or have any other problems. I've routed it down underneath here. I've routed it behind the plastics here. And then you can bring it down the same wiring harness right here that you can zip tie down so it's secure and not going to be in the way of anything or get pinched or rubbed. So I'm going to run it under all of these connectors, all of these hoses as we go through this. And let me do this kind of real time, one-handed here for a second. So like that, and then I'm going to zip tie it down nicely so it doesn't hit anything hot, doesn't rub against anything, and it'll be set, and plug that into place. Okay, so then get the new plug snapped back in, make sure that little white locking tab is locked into place and all those connectors are solid, and then this sensor will be done. Okay, so let's clean up on this side. So before we move on, I just wanted to show you here really quick. So I've run the wiring, again, back behind the plastics here, down behind the hard line for your brake line so it can go with the existing cable run. I've got zip ties I haven't clipped off yet because I wanted you to be able to see them a little bit more easily here to keep that wire secure. It's not going to bounce around or hit anything. Routes down here underneath and down. Your water pump you can put back on the post right here and then just snug that nut back down. And we're going to be done on this side. Now when you do put that cable in, make sure it's good and tight. That white tab that you pressed back and pressed down on to get the plug off, make sure that you push it back in on the new plug on the sensor itself so it doesn't come out. All right, so getting all that tied up, and then we're going to move on to the next sensor. All right, so now that that lower sensor's done, the boost sensor's done, we've laid the cable harness back here behind, and this is going to be nicely covered by our DME cover when we're done. We route it around the back, and you can see where the harness is starting to mimic the OEM harness. So we go up here to the manifold. I've already unplugged the OEM plug here. You pull back that white plug and you press down on the tab, and then the plug will come off. You plug the new one in, and you plug the OEM into the jump right here. Then you can route your other two sensors down here along the same wiring harness path. We're going to tuck it up here really nicely in front. I'll deal with those in just a second. And I've taken the power wire and just kind of laid it across the back because that's where we're going to run it over there here in a second. So we're going to lay this all out. Now when we're done, we're going to zip tie everything in place. But go ahead and replace your manifold sensor, and they're going to work on the two front. All right, so your exhaust sensor and fuel rail sensor. The nice thing about these two clusters of plugs is they only go in one place, so you can't put the wrong one in the wrong place. But just in case, you can see, again, we're going to pull up on that white tab to press on it and rock this back, and it'll come off here in just a second. And then go ahead and plug in here and plug in here. What you will notice is that the lock here on the OEM is to the front. When you install this, the lock will be to the back. It's not a big deal. The plug is keyed to the same position, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, let's talk about the fuel rail here for a second. Same locking tab, you're gonna pull back on that and pull back. This actually has a kind of double click to it. It's got a second set of tabs on it. So when it comes off, you'll get the initial kind of off the ledge, and then work it the rest of the way off. Now, once it's off, same thing, plug this into the harness, the new harness in here, but make sure that when you plug this OEM plug into the new harness, make sure that it double clicks into place. All right, so go ahead and get both those sensors replaced, and then we'll do power next. All right, so as you can see, I've got the battery cover off, and let's talk through this really quick. I thought it'd be easier to show you off the car rather than in place. Do you see the little loop right there and the little loop right there? That's what holds this into place, and there's rails on both sides that this slides down in on. So you have to slide it up off those rails. You could use a pick tool to get one side up and off the little locking tab on each side. I also used a plastic trim tool and slid it in right here to kind of press on the wall, the whole wall itself, to gap it away. I didn't use metal tools because of the how close I am to the positive post of the battery. Okay, but then you can slide this up and off. Now when you look, you've got your primary main post here, you've got your two positive posts here and here. There's the one that goes down. Go ahead and loosen that 10 millimeter nut, connect the power wire from your PCU, and then screw that nut back into place and go ahead and put the cover back on. Once that's done, we're going to walk through the rest of the wiring harness, get it all zip tied into place, and it's going to look great. One last check here across the top, because of course, when we open the driver's side door here in a second to install the OBD cable, that's going to make the car go live, and you don't want your car on or active while any of these sensors are unplugged. We don't want any errors. So double check everything. You can see my zip ties here. I haven't clipped them off yet. I'm following the OEM wiring loom. And that will mean that they're all in nice safe places. And I'll come back and snip those all off. Your OBD cable is going to plug in right here. We're going to run this in a second. We're going to come up through the firewall down there. But let's get this done first, and then we're going to jump into the driver's side footwell. Here in the driver's side footwell, you're going to want to lower this upper kick plate that goes around your airbag. So there are two long 8 millimeter bolts that hold it up into place here, and then you can kind of swing it down and out of the way. You could potentially unplug the light and pull the piece out entirely, but we should be able to do what we want to do is get back to this grommet through the firewall back here. So let me rearrange a little bit and let me get some good light so you can see what we're looking at. We're going to want to cut a very narrow slit in the grommet in the firewall, and then we're going to be pushing this cable through it. I'm going to give you the best view that I can looking up. You can see the cable's plugged in here, and you can see where it feeds up and goes through the grommet in the firewall right there. All right, y'all, so let's get caught up here a little bit. So the OBD cable is pulled up through the firewall, like I mentioned. It is connected to the PCU, which I put a little double-sided tape to and stuck to the side of the strut tower. So it seems like a good safe play to keep it. It's not gonna rattle around or bounce around or anything. So go ahead and walk through and putting your car back together. Obviously, I've stepped ahead a little bit. If you have the OEM intakes, they go down on their feet on this side. The covers are gonna go back on. And then you snap the pipe down into place. Make sure those clamps are tight on both sides. Your cross brace, you're going to install your cross brace. So you've got the V piece and the straight bar across the top. This is 56 Newton meters here in the center and 28 all the way around on the other 8 bolts. So make sure to torque them down. 28 isn't a lot. If you don't have a torque wrench that goes that low, you just snug them tight. Obviously, you've had to put your covers on first before you put your cross braces on. So your DME cover, your engine cover, make sure everything else is plugged in. You don't have any loose cables, you don't have anything that's gonna touch anywhere. Your new cabling is secure and isn't gonna touch anything hot. And at that point, you're pretty much good to go. Your back plastics just kind of level in from the back and go down and turn those little twist locks. And then at that point, you're good to test. Go ahead and fire your car up, make sure it starts, and the install is done. Good job. All right, guys, go ahead and clean up and put your tools away. You're all done. Good job. This install really isn't all that hard. You just have to be meticulous as you go through it. Now, please make sure to check out my other video series about this new product from Dinan. I can show you the new phone app. We're gonna talk about performance and other elements. This is strictly the install video, because of course, the immediate question is, what's the horsepower? What are all the changes and all those sort of things? I'm gonna cover that in the next video. So make sure to check that out. This is just the install to walk you through it and make sure that you're successful getting this into your car. Thank you to Dinan for making such a fantastic product. I'm really excited to have this in my car and see the differences that this is going to make, and I'm sure you will too. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to click like and subscribe. It makes a genuine difference to my channel, and I would truly appreciate it. I'll see you on my next video.